Hi, welcome to part 5 of the Sweater Weather Workshop. At this point, you have completed knitting your sweater, the flax. Congratulations, great job, but we're not quite done yet. We still have all these pesky ends, and then we need to give it a block. So we'll talk about what that is, different ways you can do it, and then we'll talk briefly about care for your sweater after you've done that. So for this part, you will need a darning needle and some scissors. So let's get started. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do is I like to take my sweater, my garment, and turn it inside out because we're gonna weave in all those ends on the wrong side. All right. So I'm going to start right at the top. This is the first end I have here. I'm going to take my darning needle and get that on the needle. So what I like to do on this is I kind of look at it the way it's going to show, to the world essentially. This is the right side that I'm showing right now. So I see my last yarn is right here, and we want to make that look like a completed stitch. Let me zoom in a little bit on that. There we go. All right, so my yarn is coming in here. I went in here and I snipped this. So what I like to do is to make this look like a complete stitch where it came out here, went in, and so I'm going to go right back in here. It doesn't have to be perfect, and I don't want to over pull it. So now when I'm looking at that right here, here's the stitch right where my finger's pointing. You can't tell from looking at it that it's not just a regular stitch right there. Sorry, I'm out of camera. So it just makes it a nice complete looking stitch. Now there are a few different ways to weave in ends, but basically you're gonna go, again, we're back on the wrong side. You can see all the purling on this side. You can do it a few ways, but essentially what you wanna do is go through some loops one direction and then go through some loops the other direction. So I have done this a few ways before. One way I could do it is I just go here and I'm going to go through some loops here. So I'm going to go through 1, 2, 3. It doesn't have to be an overly amount. The key really is to go one direction then another. So if you get a snag or anything, that it's secure both ways. And again, you don't want to overly pull. So a lot of times as I'm doing this, I will kind of give it a stretch. So like when I'm wearing it, it'll naturally stretch and move. So we don't want to pull so tight that we can't tell where this is on the other side. So I've just gone through like 4 stitches and now I can just go back the other way. And that's all there is to it, really. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I give it a little kind of stretch again so it just naturally, so let's look at it from the other side. So here's the line I did, which would be these purl stitches, and you really can't tell where you've woven your ends in. At this point, that is sufficient for weaving in your ends. What I like to do, because we are doing this before we do the blocking process, I will mostly snip it, but I won't snip it all the way down. So I'll kind of do a close-ish snip so that I know that I've done it. But what's going to happen, especially if you wet block it, and those stitches ease up a little bit, this might kind of go into those stitches. So if you did this and then blocked it, if you cut all the way down and then blocked it,
it may have disappeared in and gone back a little bit. So I like to do a tidy enough snip where I know that I can't weave that in anymore because I've cut it too far. But then after I block, I will give it another really close snip. So I did say that that was one way you can do it. That is the way I typically do that. Another way I could have done that is I could have just gone through, we'll pretend this is another end, both legs. I could go through both legs like that. And again, you still can't see that on the other side. So there are options, but the key really is going one direction and then the other. So if for some reason at some point this does go back a few stitches, it's not going to completely come undone because you've gone in and around and moved it. So that one is woven in. Let's go to our armpit stitches. So this is where we picked up for sleeves. And let's kind of spread it out so we can look at what we're working with. So a lot of times on the armpit, let me actually turn this. A lot of times on the armpit where you pick up your yarn, there is a noticeable hole. We kind of talked about that when we picked up the stitches for our sleeve. We picked up an extra stitch here and knit it together. You can see that here, which kind of closed a gap, but we still do have kind of a gaping hole right here. There's nothing wrong with it. You can see the stitches are correct. But if that bothers you, again, this is under your armpit, so no one should see this but you. But this is the time where you can take your weaving in ends and just close it up however you see fit. Now again, you don't have to do this. This is just if it is bothering you. If you see literally any gape, so you can see right here looking at the inside of my sweater, this is just a stitch that I somehow got loose, so that is on me right there. But you can see I kind of have some gaps over here. I have some gaps over here. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of move this direction to just cover that hole up. I'm not fixing anything, nothing's wrong with it, but if the hole is bothering you, you can do that. So again, we just want to travel that direction to go to this hole right here. So how we do that is we just kind of shimmy right along. We go through the bumps. And I don't know if I left a long enough tail to do this. This is why, especially it would be good in the armpit area if you know you're going to want to be covering up some holes. And it's okay that I shimmy over a row, and I can even do what I talked about before, going through the V. So now we can see we're getting close, and there are some other things too. I'm not really concerned about it, but I'm gonna go through this V here, and then I'm gonna take it one further so that if I just stop there, it will tighten it up a little bit, but the hole is really right here. So I'm gonna go one past this so that my yarn is laying over that hole and go through 2 more stitches. So now you can see I've put yarn over that hole. So let me take this off the needle real quick, and let's just look at how that looks. Again, there was not a problem with the knit, but you can see there's not such a gaping hole now because there's yarn covering up that hole. This is all just personal preference regarding if you want to cover that hole. But we're not done because we've only gone one direction, so we need to get at least a few stitches going back the other way, just so it is very secure. We just go through those purl bumps again, and there's kind of a hole there, so I'm gonna go through 2 here again, just to kind of tighten it up. Make sure I'm not going too tight, pulling my yarn. All right, I feel like that is sufficient. And so now, here it is. So I'm going to take my snips and cut it sufficiently for now. And again, let's look at, so now we're looking at the armpit stitches, and it's not so noticeable. But yet you also don't see where I was weaving in those ends. All right, let's do the other armpit. I actually think I did this one because I wouldn't have left a tail that short. So I'm pretty sure I've already done this one. And then you have probably used more than one skein for this. So somewhere in the middle of your sweater, you had to put a new ball on. So you'll have a situation kind of like that, where the end of one and the beginning of another is there. So what we do for this is we'll kind of do like alternate directions. So we'll do a situation like this. The leftmost side, I will travel to the right first. The right side, I will travel to the left first. But we're gonna do just the same thing, but we wanna travel opposite than where we are started from. So I gotta switch this to the side to make it easier for me here. There we go. I like to have my hand in the garment, so I'm holding just the one piece of material. So that might make it easier for you. Again, just through those purl bumps. Easy peasy. And again, with these straight lines, you don't need to be excessive about it. It's not going to go anywhere. So I just have a few one direction and a few the other direction. And then I'll give it a little tug. Get my snips. And now for the other side, we will travel the other direction. And I feel like I've already done this one. I see some stuff in there, but that's okay. We're gonna get a few more in here. And again, if you feel like something is a little messy, then knowing that you just need to go through some loops and travel, I can always jump over this if I feel like that area is bothering me. So I can always just do one of these things. Still travel in the same direction, and because we're on the wrong side, the yarn kind of covers that. So now I'm going to switch back. Yeah, I'm pretty sure and then, give it a little tug every direction so it's not too tight. And I don't need to snip it any closer. I think that's good. So let's see how that looks. And again, remember, I think mine was quite a bit different because the one skein is lighter. The other skein is a little bit darker. And you might be able to tell it might be a little scrunched here, but we still have to block. So here's where I stitched in right here. And then we should have our ends on ribbing. All right, so right here, we're gonna just go over these again. So we've already touched on this. This one, I obviously started another ball because I have 2 ends again. So very similarly to what we did last time, we'll start with 1. And because this is on the right, I'm going to cross over and head to the left. So I'm going to just move my yarn past kind of that hole and just do a few stitches one way through a few loops. Give it a little light, gentle pull, and then I'm going to go above here and head back the other direction. And give it a light tug both ways. And see that there. So I'm done with that one. Give it a snip, and then we'll work the other direction. So we started on the left, so we're going to go on the right. We're going to head direction to the right. Then back to the left. So I'm going to go underneath on this one. One more. All right. And again, give it a nice tug both directions so that yarn isn't so tight. Give it a snip. And there we have it. All right, I have one more end, and so this is my final. This is where I ended. And again, we're on ribbing, kind of where we started from. This is the bottom of the project. First one we did was the start of the project. So we'll get that yarn. And again, because it's right on the ribbing edge, I like to turn it on the right side, kind of look at what we're dealing with. So we see the yarn. Oh, it looks like I already wove in these ends. But you want to kind of clean up the stitch. So I see here, for me, I have this big thing. So you just want to kind of close it up however you feel comfortable doing. So for me, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go underneath these 2. And then because I'm on the right side now with my yarn, I'm going to go back through here. So it's going to curve around. And that's going to tighten that up. And now I'm just going to go down. Again, I am a tight bind off person, so this is always, when I bind off, I always knit tightly. I just have not seemed to break that habit. But again, go one direction, go the other direction. And now that should be sufficient. Give it a good tug each direction. And it's not perfect here, but you can play with it till it is to your specifications, what isn't going to bother you. So we are done weaving in ends, and now it's time to block. Okay, so we have finished weaving in our ends. It is that simple. So now we're going to go talk a little bit about blocking, and then I will show you two different methods to do it. So with blocking, all it is settling those stitches down. So we talked about in the beginning doing a gauge swatch, that you needed to knit up your gauge and then you needed to block it before figuring out what your gauge is. The reason that is because you are going to block it usually before you wear it. Now with some items, depending on, like for instance, when I make socks, I do not block my socks before I wear them. I am fine with that, and then after I wear them, I will throw them in the wash machine, and that's fine. But with sweaters, a lot of time, and even especially the more complicated your stitches are, for instance, lace is essential to block. You're not going to see that lace work unless you block it, and by stretching those things out. But blocking will just relax all your stitches. So a lot of things that may not look right about your sweater, you can't put your finger on it, it may just not look right, will come out in blocking when those stitches relax. So there's two common methods to blocking. One is steam blocking, which you can use a hand steamer, which is what I have, or you can use an iron with a steam setting on it. The other method is wet blocking. For me personally, when I became a knitter, I learned by wet blocking. That is how I always did my blocking, and that's fine. The girls at Arkansas Yarn Co. always steam block. So both of them will achieve the same results. They like to steam block because it's instant. You don't have to wait for it to dry, things like that. I like steam blocking for that reason. However, I also like wet blocking because when we talk about care for your garments after the fact, after you've knit them and blocked this, and a year from now, when you're getting it out of closet for the winter season or whatever, at some point you will have to wash your garment. So for me personally, I like wet blocking because I feel it is the most accurate result, because at some point, especially with garments, maybe not with shawls or scarves or things like that, you will have to wash this garment, wet wash it. So for me, wet blocking seems to be the most accurate of how this is going to wear in the long run. But you can do either method, and we are going to go over, and I will show you both methods. So let's start with steam blocking. Okay, so I'm sitting on my floor. And you'll notice I have blocking mats. If you don't have blocking mats, I know that some people will block their sweaters, maybe lay them on the bed with a towel. So you can just use what you need to. Now you'll see with the way I have this sweater is constructed, I can pretty much just lay it flat like this and block it out. So I don't really need blocking pins, but blocking pins are a great tool. There's these kind, which we usually have at Arkansas Yarn Co., where you can just stick in the sides. This is great, like for instance, if you're ribbing, you wanted it to look perfectly straight, you could line up your ribbing and do this and just stick those right in there like that. But for this sweater, I feel like we don't need that, but it's good to know what tools are available to you to use. Because like I said, other garments could have lace or cables and really need kind of worked out another way. And another thing you can use is T-pins. Usually they're like in a sewing department, and you can just individually stick the T-pins in. But for this, I feel like it's laying pretty nice and flat. I just need to relax my stitches and we'll be done. So I have a steamer here. And with a steamer, or if you were using an iron, you don't want it directly on. You just want it close enough to steam those things. And then just kind of gently, for this, it's nice and stockinette. So you can just kind of pat it down. Just make sure that it's laying nice on those stitches. Again, this sweater being mostly stockinette, there's not a lot of heavy blocking that needs to be done. Blocking is even more essential when you have, color work, different stitch patterns, where my steamer is going a little crazy. But this one is nice and stockinette, so you don't need to overly block it. Like I said, it's just to get those stitches to relax. So you just kind of smooth it out as you're going to give it a nice finished look to it. So let's go up here to the sleeves. Try not to steam up my camera as I go here. So again, I just kind of give it a nice smooth finish. So now let's discuss wet blocking. So there is kind of two different ways you could do this also. So I'm going to show you a way that isn't like full immersion into water. So similar to the steaming, I just have a spray bottle with water here. And again, because this pattern I feel like doesn't need an over amount of blocking, so I could skip the full immersion in water blocking and just do this, especially on the areas where I want it to look nice and neat, which is, like around the different raglan increases, around here. But all the stockinette, is sitting nicely already. So all you would do, similar to the steaming, is you're just gonna get it wet on those different areas. The difference is then you just have to let it dry instead of the steam, having hot air on it. So I get it wet enough, and then it is fully wet, and I just kind of straighten out how I want to with my sweater. So if I need to stretch it out there so that those are, and then I will let it dry. When I'm happy with it, I will usually crank up, I'm in my office, so I will crank up my fan and just let it dry. So you do not have to full on immerse for wet blocking. Just giving it a spray. These stitches are quite wet, but not soaked as if you would soak it in water. So that is another way to do blocking.
All right, so we're going to talk about the last way to do blocking, and I'm not going to fully show this because to finish this video, I need my sweater blocked to show you the finished product. But let's talk about this, and this will also go for after caring for your sweater.
So to fully wet block, again, you can do this in different things. I have what's called a strucket. You can get this online, and I like it because it has a little spout here that empties out the water slowly. Because think about it, you would fill this up with water and fully immerse your garment. Now, once you have done that, you will add in a little soap, but not just any soap. You want some kind of wool wash. Now, I know that there's wool washes, like I have a store that has different wool washes. I have one here that I like called Soak. This is Pineapple Grove scent. So you can have like a scented or unscented, but the key is that it's wool wash because it is specifically to take care of wool things, thus your garment. So you don't need a lot. Fill it up with water, put in a little soap, and then mix the soap around. Now, I'm going to go over 2 methods of the water. So again, when I was a new knitter, I signed up for a Knit Stars class. And it was the year that Andrea Mowry was on there. And she went over blocking and washing your garments. Andrea Mowry's method is when she puts water in to soak her garment, even the first time, she puts the hottest water from the sink. Now this is, in the knitting community in general, this is very highly unpopular opinion. However, if you do that, so for a longer time, I did that because that was how I learned. The key to doing that, if you do that, hot water plus motion equals felted things. So the key to that would be put in your soap, put in your hot water, move your sweater just enough to get it fully immersed, and then do not touch it. Then you let the water come to room temperature. You do not touch it. And your garment will be fine. It will block very nicely. I can say, like I did that for a number of years doing that until everyone's like, oh no, you never soak your things in hot water. Andrea Mowry still does this because I know that she's talked about it recently. Again, highly unpopular opinion. Doable only if you let the water naturally come to room temperature. So just putting that out there because I want you to have all the options. However, if that makes you nervous, then just put in cool water with a little bit of soak or whatever your wool wash is. Get your sweater fully immersed, that soap moving around in there, and then let it fully soak. There's not really a time limit for this. I mean, you don't need to let it sit overnight or anything like that. You just want your sweater fully, thoroughly wet and immersed in that soak. Once you do that, you will let the water out. Again, you can do this in like one of those cheap plastic thing for washing dishes. I've seen people do it in their bathtubs, in their sinks. Whatever works for you. I like this because, again, with the friction of the moving of the yarn, your project's going to be very heavy, very wet. I like this because I kind of just gradually let this out. And then this also has this where I can lift it out and let more water come out naturally before I'm touching and dealing with the project. So that is called a strucket. Either way you do it, I usually have a thick towel laying down, ready to go next to wherever I'm emptying this in my sink. And you grab your sweater and you do want to kind of like flatten to get as much wetness out of the garment. You don't want to overly work it, kind of like a dough. You don't want to overly manipulate it. You want to do it with as little motion as possible, but you do want to squeeze as much water out as possible. Once you've done that, lay it down on your towel and then roll your towel up with your sweater inside. What I like to do, one step further, put it on the floor, the towel, and stomp on it. Get all that excess water out you can. Once you do that, you will lay it flat to dry somewhere, with a
with a fan on it, whatever works for you. And and pin it out too if you need to for a garment, then pin it out to where you want to lay nice, and then it is going to dry like it is laying. And you just leave it alone till it's dry, and that's it. So not hard to do. That is fully wet blocking, but that is also washing. When it comes to washing your sweater, wool is very great. Like, you don't have to wash it all the time. It's not like, a t-shirt where you want to wash it every time or something like that. It has properties where it's not getting that moisture off of you. So you don't have to wash it all the time, but a good rule of thumb, if you're questioning how often to wash your garments, for instance, I live in Arkansas. So a lot of my sweaters, like this one, which is thicker, I'm just not going to be able to wear for a good portion of the year. So either it will go up top in my closet if I have the room. If I don't have the room, I will put it in a bin and I will get it out once like fall hits and those cooler temperatures hit. So I will either wash all my garments right before they go in because I want to make sure where I'm storing it is nice and clean so that there's no bugs, insects, moss that's going to attack it. And I want to make sure my garments are clean because those moths and things are attracted to dark areas, which it will be, but they're also attracted to the dirtiness of the garment. So I will either clean it really good before, or I will clean it when I take them all out for the season. I will clean every single one of those garments before the season. And then usually, unless I spill something on it or I'm perspiring a lot, I won't have to clean those garments the whole season I'm wearing them. I might need to glean garments, which we will talk about briefly, but I don't need to wash them. So I usually wash my garments about once a year. And that's how you do it. Again, it's not hard at all. It just takes some time, some patience to do it. It's definitely not a quick thing when you're washing your garments because especially if you have a full-on sweater, I think like a full cabled sweater, that's going to be thick. That means that water is going to really get in there. And I even will sometimes, if I have a thicker sweater and I've washed it, I will kind of like leave it in a safe space with a fan on it for a day. And then I will go in and flip it over so that the other side also starts getting dry. Because remember, it's laying on that towel that was wet. You can switch out the towel so that there's a dry towel there. But that is all there is to blocking. So let's briefly talk gleaning and what that is. All right, so let's talk gleaning. Gleaning is basically de-pilling. So after you get a lot of wear, this is a garment I wore yesterday. And as I wore it, I realized how much I need to glean it. I don't know if it's going to come through, but if you look toward the bottom, you'll see a bunch of pills. They're all over this garment. And that just happens naturally when you're wearing. It's like the rubbing of the garment against your skin. It happens more with some fibers rather than others, but there's going to come a time when you're going to see just pills all over and it kind of takes away the shine of your garment. So we just need to take a minute to de-pill. And again, there's a few different ways to do this. There is a tool called a gleaner, which I think I have somewhere, but I'm going to show you the tool that is my favorite and super easy to use, and we carry it at Arkansas Yarn Co. Okay, so the tool I use that I really love this is from Coco Knits. It's called Coco Knits Fuzz Off, and this we do have in stock at Arkansas Yarn Co. And it's basically kind of like a straight razor. So all I'm going to do, and again, I don't know, okay, you can see some fuzz on here. It's way more pilly than it's coming across on camera to me. But all I'm going to do is go with
the knit stitches and just do enough force where I can see those pills are moving. And I'll show you in the end. I'm just working with those knit stitches downward, and now you may be able to see the fuzz that's building. And so now I have these fuzzies. So that just makes it look a lot nicer, neater. So let's start all the way at the top here. I'm just kind of like combing the hair on my garment. And again, you'll be able to see when your garment needs this. You don't need to press super hard because you don't want to make a hole in your garment, but just hard enough where you can see those pills are going down with where you're brushing it. And again, there's the fuzz. So there's no timetable of when you need to do this, but you will see it on your garment. So this is another how to take care of your garments and keep them looking like you just made them.
Congratulations, you finished your first sweater, the flax. I hope you enjoyed this class as much as I did and Jessa did. We enjoyed walking you through these steps. So please, if you finished your sweater, tag us on Instagram or Facebook at Arkansas Yarn Co. so we can see your finished projects.